Welcome to Fearless Finances, where I'm trying to take the fear out of your finances. This morning, I was going to wake up early, and I did. And I was going to get started right off the bat working on videos from my Mexico City trip so that you could finally see all the beautiful things that are part of Mexico City and add to the library that I have for my money-making move to Mexico. However, my day got a little derailed. First of all, I decided to relax a little too much this morning, and then one thing led to another, and before I knew it, it was 3 o'clock in the afternoon. That's not very typical for me. Now, I sat down and I was gonna go through the footage, but making that kind of video, since I'm not used to it, I think would be a little bit challenging. I'm used to just kind of sitting here and doing a little bit of research and chatting about a lot of things that I know. For this, I'd have to do a lot more prep work. Now, I have some other videos that I could maybe do, but then I thought, you know what? Let's just open up my YouTube and see what we got in there. Maybe there's something good for us to watch together. And when I got there, I found this. Now I'll just tell you, either of these first two picks are a winner for me, and hopefully they'd be a winner for you. Let's start with Abby Phillip and see what she has to say about Trump downplaying slavery. I know this is going to be good. I'll see you on the other side.
Donald Trump says that one of the reasons for his crackdown on Smithsonian museums is, quote, everything discussed is how bad slavery was. What we try to do on this program is create a platform for discussion and debate that reflects the very real differences that exist in this country. It's what echo chambers in our society fail to do, frankly. But on this topic, it's important to say objectively, slavery was indeed bad. It was evil, the nation's original sin. And it is impossible to understand the true history of this country without fully grappling with slavery's impact. Simply because of their birthplace and the color of their skin, the bodies and spirits of Black men, women, and children were exploited for profit and power. They were forced onto ships, bound by shackles and collars that ripped off their skin. One older man described it as iron entering our souls. Some chose to jump into the waters infested with sharks rather than feel that iron. Now, once they arrived on this very soil, they were forced to work by way of the whip, despite being starved, sleep-deprived, threatened, tortured, physically and psychologically. They were auctioned off, humiliated, fearful, and separated from their families and their children. Black women and girls were raped and sexually assaulted. Many were brutally murdered and mutilated. Now, this endured for decades, centuries, and even in the places where slavery was not legal, institutions from our banks to universities were built on enslaved labor in both the North and in the South. And for many of the white Americans who did not personally own slaves, they benefited from a caste system that concentrated wealth and political power in their hands. So, when we acknowledge the existence of Black people who operated George Washington's Mount Vernon or the Black hands that built the White House, we are acknowledging the existence, the perseverance, and the contributions of the souls that white supremacy sought to erase. Those people built families, they developed a culture, they were the keepers of the faith, cultivators of community. And they are the ones who deserve credit for forcing America to rid itself of the stain of slavery. Now, all of this information, these stories are from the Smithsonian's African American History Museum. And I share this not as a lecture for you, but as a lesson. America, the superpower, is largely possible only because of the superpowers of people who went lifetimes without the same rights of generations who were boosted from their backs. True history should include everything. Yes, the evils and the horrors too. And museums are supposed to be places that protect those stories, the images, the lessons, the very things that inform so much of our current state of our republic, from racism to poverty. No matter how painful, or in the president's words, how horrible the lesson.
Okay, so sorry. I didn't even know where to stop in that. It was so good. Oh my gosh, Abby, you nailed it. And I have no idea, simply do not understand why anyone wouldn't want to learn more about that, become more compassionate, become more understanding, unless you actually think Black and brown people aren't the same as you. They don't deserve the same things as you. I also want to say this. I kind of take exception to when she said slavery was America's original sin. Because I gotta say, the way that we treated Indigenous people, it's gotta rank right up there. In my mind, pretty equal. In fact, let's Google where that started so that maybe there's something about this that I don't know and understand yet. Alrighty, I haven't opened up too many of these different options that are available here from my Google search, but it looks like the phrase potentially originated from this book, I think, unless the book just adopted it. Unsure. But it does say racism, white privilege, and the bridge to a new America. So at least it encompasses all of the racism. Most of what I can see here is about the book. And I haven't seen any mention of our Indigenous friends. In my mind, just as horrific. I don't even want to compare the two. Both are horrific. It's horrific. There's just nothing more to say about it. But let's get back to Abby because she's going to share someone's personal perspective.
Now, just listen to one formerly enslaved man describe what slavery is like in his own words.
You know what I'd rather do? If I thought that I'd ever be a slave again, I'd take a gun and because you're nothing but a dog. You're not a thing but a dog.
This happens to be more emotional than I kind of thought it would be. But that is how things like this move me. And I hope that they move you too, because those of us who are moved will make a difference. This gentleman speaking reminded me of a museum that I went to a few years ago. It's called the Whitney Plantation. You can see some of the pictures of it scrolling behind me. The people who purchased this land and building wanted to preserve it, to teach the story of slavery. And I learned a lot and I was moved by a lot. And this gentleman speaking about what his experience was like, there's many of those similar quotes at this museum. People who had actually been enslaved talking about what it was like. And this is the other thing. Even after Black people were emancipated, their life was far from fair. Like I thought in my head, like people were emancipated, they just went on with their life. Yeah, it was kind of hard, you know. And I don't even want to go, it was kind of hard. I actually recognized what Jim Crow would be like, or I think that I can. How there were separate wages, that Black people couldn't necessarily get ahead, that schools were segregated, and how harmful that was. So I don't want to minimize any of that. But I didn't realize how hard it was until I was impacted by basically two things. One of them was the Whitney Museum. You see, this museum and this land and outbuilding has been set up this way since the turn of the last century, so the early 1900s. This was decades after the abolition of slavery, right? But what I learned at this plantation is that many people of color, many Black people, had nowhere else to work. No one else would hire them. So they stayed at the plantations, being subjected to the same horrible treatment. Yes, they might have been emancipated, but where are they going to go? Nobody else would hire them. They were paid barely any wages, but now they were basically told you have to pay for everything yourself. So they were charged excessive rent for their horrible housing situation. And they had these little mercantile stores right there on the plantation. The stores were set up so that people could buy their daily necessities, but again, at hugely elevated prices. There was nothing fair about this. There was no real help. And this is mostly because right after the Civil War, we tried to make things more equal, but the racists of the South would not let it happen. And they continued to lynch Black people. They continued to torment them, to forget this history, to rewrite it, and not say that it was white people who caused this and it was a dramatic harm is horrible. Here's the second thing that motivated me about that. There, of course, are a ton of movies out there. Wonderful, exceptional. I talk about a lot of them in my ethics classes. Movies like The Help, Till, that help us understand what it was like for Black people, African Americans, and other Black people who might have been enslaved or other people of color to get out of this and how horrible it was. But the one that reminds me of what I was talking about at this plantation is The Butler. The Butler is based on a true story of a gentleman who worked at the White House through, I think, 5 different presidents. He was a little boy on one of those plantations, not enslaved, but not free. If you have never seen this movie, I highly encourage you to watch it.
Are you political, Mr. Gaines?
No, sir.
Good. We have no tolerance for politics at the White House.
I'm Cecil Gaines. I'm the new butler.
You hear nothing, you see nothing. You only serve.
You know he got that job himself. The White House called him. He didn't call the White House.
I want to hear all the stories.
I don't know how many stories you're going to hear because they done swore him to some kind of secret code. I'm so proud of you.
Did you go to an all-colored school, Cecil?
I didn't go to school, Mr. President. I grew up on a cotton farm.
Get back to work.
Don't you lose your temper with that man. It's his world. We just living in it.
About time you go ahead on your own.
You looking for some help?
You done broke our window. You done stole our food. And now you asking for a job?
I know how to serve.
They say this new white boy's smooth.
I am thrilled to be working with all of you over the next 4 years.
Dr. King.
What did your daddy do?
He's a butler.
Young brother, the Black domestic play an important role in our history.
I never understood what you all really went through. You've changed my heart.
What? Get the hell out of my house! I'm sorry, Mr. Butler. I didn't mean to make fun of your hero.
Everything you are and everything you have is because of that butler.
It is a great movie with great people in it. In fact, it was one of the final movies that Robin Williams was in. He plays Eisenhower in this. But this section of the movie
It's his world. We just living in it.
relates to exactly what I'm talking about. At the hand of white people, Black people have been through a lot. And to rob people of the truth of the story is adding more cruelty to the situation, at least in my opinion. I've been trying to say that more often. I think, my opinion, because I don't know everything. But I got to tell you, it is not right or fair to rewrite history so that Donald J. feels better about it. In fact, in my humble opinion, part of the problem in our lovely little borders is we never really have said that we're sorry for doing all that. We have never made any sort of formal apology. This is where reparations comes in. And I know people don't like to talk about it, but things will not get better until we do everything that we can to right a wrong. But I think Abby is going to pull a panel together and we're going to get to see what they have to say about this muy importante topic.
We are here in the studio with our panel, Leah Wright-Rigueur. I was actually surprised to see President Trump basically saying the quiet part out loud, that this review of the Smithsonian is not about even just something vague about reviewing history to make sure that it's fair. He wants to make it so that it talks less about slavery. What does that say to you?
Well, I think it's an effort. It's part of a larger effort to both stainwash and whitewash American history and essentially erase all of the parts and disappear all of the parts that make that make President Trump uncomfortable, that feel distasteful, that are a reflection of the actual real and horrific parts of our history. And I find it a little ironic. You know, earlier today, as I was listening to some of the commentary, my first thought was, wait a second. I wonder if the president has actually ever visited any of the Smithsonian museums. And then I remembered that in 2017, he actually took a tour of the National Museum of African American History and Culture.
Let me just play, actually, what he said during that tour. Listen to this.
I had the privilege of visiting the National Museum of African American History and Culture right here in Washington, D.C. It's a new, beautiful Smithsonian museum that serves as a shining example of African Americans' incredible contributions to our culture, our society, and our history. It also tells of the great struggle for freedom and equality that prevailed against the sins of slavery and the injustice of discrimination.
This is what I'm coming to believe about this man. He's a puppet. For the vast majority of time, he's a puppet. You say the right things to him, you manipulate him in the right way, he will do and say whatever you want. That's what I think this particular video is. Now, over the course of the last, 8 years since that was recorded, he's had even more evil people around him telling him what he should think. Proud Boys, Stephen Miller, Steve Bannon, I don't even know. Disgusting people. I think this man's always been racist. It's pretty evident with the cases around his rental properties, the Central Park 5. I've got a video about that. I'll link it at the end of this. It's pretty evident this man's always been racist. In fact, Mary Trump, his niece, talks about him using the N-word, and he's a racist. Here, he's a puppet. He's being fed certain information and in this moment in time is motivated to do it. He's now motivated to be a true and pure racist because he has enough people in his base that are also very racist, and some of them have enough bias that they're willing to buy into this lunacy and this nonsense. There's a whole other host of people who don't even know what the frick is going on right now. This man is a disturbing puppet. Back to the commentary.
So was it that he didn't believe what he read from the teleprompter as he recorded that video, or what?
You know, I'm really struggling to understand in a lot of ways, particularly given that the tour that he took with director Lonnie Bunch was actually a reflection of really the mastery that and really the care and the patience that historians, that scholars, that curators put into the Museum of African American History and Culture.
To me, her point is the point. Why are we not letting people who are professionals in this area take care of their business? We have fired off all these people who are in the health areas of our government, in our national security, in our FBI, and now Trump thinks he's some sort of historian, when it's pretty evident he's an idiot. And this is where I get back to the lowest common denominator is controlling all of this. It's people who are either not bright enough to figure that out or are able to be manipulated to believe that somebody knows it when they don't, or they just won't take the time and effort to get involved. Oh, and then we have the hate camp, which also, if you're part of the hate camp, you're also part of the stupid camp. It really makes no sense that you are superior to anyone. That is not how it works. All you have to do is look around and you can see capable people of every gender, race, and creed. It's only stupidity that makes you think something else. Back to our commentary.
It is not just about the horrors of slavery, although it tells that very important story. It actually follows this really brilliant model where you move through the museum and it tells the story not just of enslaved Americans in America, but also of the resilience, of the triumph. And in doing so, it tells a story that is very much about democracy and about a quest for democracy and the way that Americans both built this country, but also the story and the narrative of like a truly American experience. And so for the president, I think, to just simply erase that and push that away tells it, particularly after praising it a few years ago, tells us that this is part of a much larger agenda. This is part of a much larger agenda to erase things that really, I think the country is just refuses to deal with and is really uncomfortable.
That is exactly it. 1000%. The only way that he can go from at one point supporting it to wanting to erase it is this is part of a bigger agenda. This is Project 2025. This is Russell Vogt, Christian nationalists, white supremacists, and the most ugly and nasty parts of America. Now, if you continue to support Donald Trump, it is your moral responsibility to know that. This isn't politics as normal. This is not politics as usual. When you have the National Guard being deployed into cities and you don't have any red flags going up, you are part of the problem. Back to some commentary from Abby.
I mean, he said as much by ending this post with, "This country cannot be woke because woke is broke." He says, "We have to have the hottest country in the world, and we want people to talk about it, including our museums." Why is he equating talking about slavery with woke?
Okay, my favorite friend, Scott Jennings, is about to talk. Some of it sounds really good, and then he gets a little crazy again. We're going to have some fun with that. But before we go there, I want to talk about this whole statement of woke. And this is probably why Trump put woke in that statement. How many here know how long woke has been being used in our vocabulary regarding racism? It's going on close to 100 years. And quite honestly, this definition is why I think Trump put that in a tweet. You see, woke was the word that was used by people of color, Black people specifically, to identify white people who were allies. We were considered woke. It's the word we would use for people who recognize that not being a racist isn't good enough, that we need to be anti-racist, that we must advocate, we must help, we must do whatever we can to assist whenever we can. That is somebody who's woke, at least in my book. And that is why Mr. Donald J. put woke in that. Is it a tweet, a twit? What is it called when you're on Truth Social? Not truthing, because he's a liar. But this was truth to him. Anyway, back to Abby and Scott Jennings.
Look, I think, let me just start this conversation by saying that my personal view is slavery was a reprehensible institution. I agree with your words that it was our original sin. We also fought a war to eradicate it and to get over it as a country. And that was a necessary thing that happened, and a lot of people died, and we did eradicate it, and that's a good thing. I think what he's asking is, in our museums, what defines us? Are we going to be defined by the worst moment or the worst institution or the worst mistake we ever made? Or are we going to be defined by what we've done moving forward to get over it and to become the greatest nation on the earth? My belief is that he wants to look at these museums, not because he wants to do away with the idea that slavery occurred, but that he wants to ask a very simple question. Are we going to present ourselves as being exceptional or not? And I think he believes there is an effort by some to continue to try to define us from our worst moment instead of to try to focus and define us based on our best moments.
I don't know. I just like to get along with everybody. I don't think I'm better than anybody, and I don't want anybody else to think they're better than us. Couldn't we all just get along? I don't know. I think it's a ridiculous statement I think it's a ridiculous point of view. I have no idea why we would need that. In fact, I think the smartest people are the ones who recognize there's a lot to learn from a lot of other people and aren't putting people into categories or rankings. For example, sometimes I wonder if we'd never gone around and colonized all these different nations. If we actually just let people live the way they wanted to live. I mean, after all, what's wrong with living in a tent and having a fire and foraging for food and taking care of the land? Like, people, if they chose to live that way, great. Who's to say that this whole industrialized world is actually better? Because after all, right now we're killing the planet. Now, I'll also say this, I would not fare well. I kind of like to have a bed and I like a good shower. But if I grew up then and that was my way of life, maybe that's how it would be. And it would be okay. This whole greatest country on earth and American exceptionalism, ridiculous. By the way, in his little rant about I think it's the biggest sin and da 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 da, how many of y'all felt a butt coming? Right? We fought a war to free the enslaved people, yada, yada, yada. But yeah. Oh, Scott, I don't think white people should ever, correction, unless white people are going to support and advocate for people of color or any marginalized group, unless white people are going to advocate for them, you don't get an opinion. That's my thought. Like, you don't get a vote. You don't get to have an opinion unless you're going to advocate for the people who are actually impacted by it. But anyway, let's hear what Scott has to say.
Which started when we eradicated slavery and began to move forward as the light of the world.
The light of the world? Hello. Should we do a polling sample? Who thinks the United States is the light of the world? Are you kidding me? What is wrong with these people? They have no conception of what's going on in the rest of the world and how stupid we look having elected Donald J. Trump. Unbelievable. But one of the follow-up comments is even better than that.
And so that's what I think.
Museums, that's what makes us an exceptional nation, is because they tell the history and the story of our country, and therefore, you know, these horrible, horrific moments in our history. The original sin, as Abby talked about, when it comes to slavery, has, you know, we of course did eradicate it, but look where we've come today. And I think those museums, like to your point, make America exceptional. And in museums all around the world that document atrocities, whether it be, you know, from Nazi Germany to eradicating slavery here in the United States, you have to learn the lessons of the past. And to deny it is to defend it.
I don't think he's denying it. And Bachi may want to comment on this as well. But I think what he wants to ask is a simple question. As we present our history, are we spending most of our time focused on something terrible? Are we going to spend more time as we enter our 250th anniversary focused on what this country has done to improve the lives of every single person who lives here? We are the light of the world for a reason, because we're an improving commodity.
I don't think she's buying it, and neither am I. This is not a marketing plan. We're not trying to market the United States to the rest of the world. I don't know about you, but I try to live my life as a good person, and I hope people recognize that. I try to live my life with a certain amount of integrity and honesty and graciousness and generosity. And I hope that other people around me simply notice that. I don't need to put together a marketing plan so that I look like the best nation on earth, or the best person around. And let me take this just one step further. I've talked about this in videos in the past, and I believe it to be true. People who admit their faults and honestly work to rectify them are the people who I respect the most and I trust more in the future. People who try to act like everything is so great and they never do anything wrong and can't apologize for the stuff that they do. Well, I don't think they're a shining light on the hill. They are not people I respect, and they are not leaders that I want. Let's hear what Abby has to say.
The idea that slavery happened, it's hard to understand what we've overcome if you don't even talk about what it was. You know, I think that kind of waters down the whole.
I don't think anybody's proposing that we ignore that it happened. I don't think that's accurate.
I think that the problem is that there are people, and Scott used the term a couple of times, and I don't think it was meant with any type of ill intent, but he said, you know, we got over it. And I think that's the problem. I think that there are a lot of people in this country who believe that for some reason we got over it. I mean, the fact is that American chattel slavery is vastly different than what Jillian Michaels and others talk about when they talk about slavery around the world. I mean, the chattel slavery system that we had was extremely transactional. It was actually codified in law, and it was based upon the color and race, as you so eloquently pointed out in your opening. And so not only when you think about that portion of where we are, 26 of our first 30 Supreme Court justices owned slaves. The people who are on our money every single day owned slaves. United States presidents, members of the United States Congress owned slaves. Lehman Brothers, we're not far from Wall Street, owned slaves. Brooks Brothers suits that we wear own slaves. So not only are we talking about the epicenter and the foundation of where our country was built, we have to acknowledge that. But even more importantly, and this is where I believe that Scott and I can find agreement on this issue. I mean, Breon and Megan Walker, two of my best friends in the world, their dad was the first African-American SGA president at the University of South Carolina, right? He was an exec at IBM, but he was one of the first. Right? We're still talking about first that emerged and stood on those shoulders. I tell the story often about my mom and dad. My mom helped desegregate high schools. In Hamilton High School in Memphis, Tennessee, my dad shot in the Orangeburg Massacre. This is a part of my story. This isn't some faint, distant history. Yeah. And so the reason I bring that up is because I think that American exceptionalism talks about the fact that Black folk enslaved folk help build this country for what it is. They built Washington, D.C., but all of us are around this table. Abby, myself, all of us, not just Abby and myself, all of us are around this table because of the sacrifices and the blood and the sweat and the tears these people poured in.
It's so good. Oh my gosh. I've seen him on here before, and he is so passionate, and his family story is so moving. And this is what's impactful about a fully honest look at history. We cannot ignore parts of it. We cannot erase certain people's stories. It all makes a difference. Every voice matters. Do me a favor. If you've been to a museum or watched a movie or found something very impactful, I would like you to note it below, whether it happens to be about slavery, racism, sexism, the Holocaust. Oh my gosh, even financial matters. Here in Mexico, their financial reserve or their Federal Reserve is open to the public as a museum. I even found that super moving. So please note in the comments below something that you've watched or witnessed that's helped move you. Because unlike these people who want to say that emotions are bad to make decisions, our emotions move us into the right directions. They're God-given. And anyone who has any faith in anything bigger than us should know and recognize that. This is where patriarchy fails. And we'll be doing a video on that soon too. So if you liked this content, I encourage you to subscribe. I am almost monetized and you can help me. I'd also like you to like this video so that other people see it. You can also check out one of these videos and I'll see you there.